Alright, this is one that you guys have been asking for, so I'm going to go ahead and give it to you. Today, I'm doing a comparison of Frederic Malle's Portrait of a Lady and Diptyque's Eau Capitale. So, Portrait of a Lady versus Eau Capitale. I'm going to tell you all about it. I'm also going to give you 3 additional fragrances that might be similar to this really awesome fragrance, Portrait of a Lady, and then tell you which of these is my favorite of the 2. So if you're curious to learn about these, then please stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sebastian with Smelling Great Fragrance Reviews. That's right, today we're talking about Portrait of a Lady, one of my favorite fragrances of all time from the house of Frederic Malle, and comparing it to Eau Capitale from Diptyque that was launched last year. These 2 are fragrances focusing on rose. They're sort of in the same style, but do they smell alike? Well, I'll let you know all about it. Plus, you're going to find out about 3 additional fragrances that are kind of similar to this fragrance. But before we do all that, if this is your first time tuning into my channel and you still haven't subscribed to the channel, please click the subscribe button below and also click the bell so that you'll be notified for future videos and giveaways. So Frederic Malle's Portrait of a Lady is a fragrance that I've loved ever since I first smelled it, going back to 2012. It's one of my favorite fragrances. It's just the way it smells just does it for me, you know? It's a big, intense, in-your-face concoction of roses, patchouli, incense, fruits of raspberry and blackcurrant, then there's spices and some woody notes. So it's an intense experience, and it's a very, very dense wear. It's gotten slightly different than when it used to be, but still I think it's still amazing since the changeover from the original house of Frederic Malle to Estée Lauder. Eau Capitale, on the other hand, oh, one more thing. This is also considered an oriental floral fragrance. So, launched in 2010. It's been around for 10 years. And you know what? Also, I should prepare you. I do have a video all about this fragrance coming up sometime within the next couple of weeks. But on the other hand, Eau Capitale is a fragrance that was launched last year. It's considered a Chypre floral fragrance. This is from the house of Diptyque. This is created by Olivier Pescheux. This one's created by Dominique Ropion. With this one, it's a Chypre style fragrance, but also really intense with the patchouli and rose. So I think I could see why people might think it's similar to this. But you know what? They're totally different to me. I think the only thing that's similar to these fragrances is patchouli and rose, patchouli and rose, and it stops there. It's completely stopping there. But with this one, you have rose, patchouli, pink pepper, and bergamot. Keep that pink pepper in mind. And the other thing I also want to mention is this fragrance goes green, whereas Portrait of a Lady does not go green, and it starts reminding me of Tempo from Diptyque. So almost seems like to me, well, both of them were created by Olivier Pescheux for one, so it's his style. You can see it, and both of them for me seems like Tempo came before Eau Capitale, and it's the evolution of Tempo to become Eau Capitale, whereas they've got the base. There's no rose in here, but it's patchouli and greenish notes. There's also pink pepper here. With this one, they've added the rose and basically given you a Chypre accord as well at the same time. So it's interesting because it's loads of patchouli, but a very, very green patchouli with rose. And it totally does have a very Chypre styling. So I feel like if you haven't caught my Chypre fragrance videos on this particular style of perfumery, you should, to learn a little bit about this particular style, because in the end, they're 2 different styles. This is considered an oriental floral. This is considered a Chypre floral. They are using 2 similar notes of patchouli and rose in both, but it stops completely there. So the differences are the spices for 1, the incense for 2 in this one, and the fruits in here. This does not have those. But with this one, you have pink pepper. The pink pepper is definitely not in here, and so you can totally notice it. And what I also noticed with Eau Capitale is the greenness. The greenness is very, very prominent, and that's when it starts reminding me of the patchouli and Tempo. But what else do I see the differences? When I'm wearing the fragrances, they go in complete different directions. They don't settle similarly, in fact, not at all. But I can see why people would think that they smell alike because, you know, they have both patchouli and a rose in the notes. But as I was saying, they stop there. The other thing that I also noticed with these two fragrances is this one stays dense on and on and on. This one does get lighter. It does get lighter, and the pink pepper develops further. As the rose is toning down, it does get pink pepper spicy. Although I know that pink pepper as a note has some rosy nuances, so I feel like it complements those two notes complement one another. But still, when this one is getting drying down, I feel like the pink pepper starts developing more. You can start smelling the spiciness of the pink pepper, and then the greenness develops more too. The other thing I want to point out is both of the fragrances are different spicy. Whereas this one to me is a fresh spicy, this one is to me a warm spicy. You can totally notice the warmth in this fragrance because you have those warm notes. Incense is a warm note. The spices of cinnamon and cloves, and I think cinnamon is definitely not a note, but it does have cinnamony kind of nuances. I think it's mostly cloves, but the incense and the cloves are warm notes, whereas this one doesn't have any warm notes. I could consider the patchouli maybe slightly warmish notes, but to me it's an aromatic freshness rather than a warm oriental well, I don't think this is really fresh to begin with. It's warm and spicy, but here it's a fresh aromatic spicy in comparison to this one. So I hope this all makes sense to you guys, so I can kind of tell you exactly what the differences are between the two, because in the end I can see some undeveloped noses to say, okay, this one smells like that, yada yada, vice versa, but they don't act the same way once you get past the rose and the patchouli, because that's what's reminding people of one another, and it's pretty much stops there. The wearing experiences are different, whereas this one on me, you can totally tell the difference. It's light, it becomes a little transparent, the density is kind of gone. This one still kicks butt. This is very, very dense fragrance, probably one of the most intense fragrances in my collection, and that's what I like about it. It's overly intense. It's really, really in your face intense, and I love that about it. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't hate Eau Capitale. I really love it. I feel like it's definitely in line with the Diptyque fragrances because I love this house. It doesn't match Frederic Malle. They're completely different houses. Frederic Malle fragrances can get very overwhelming and intense, so I rarely find a lot of their fragrances classy. There are a few like L'Eau de Vie, French Lover, Vetiver Extraordinaire, and a few others, but I find these fragrances a lot classier because they're not that in-your-face punching overwhelming qualities in fragrances, if that makes sense to you guys. Don't get me wrong, I like both styles, I love both houses. I have a top 20 on the channel on the Diptyque fragrances. Go check it out, and you know, tell me if you haven't caught that, definitely go see and how I rank my fragrances. But in the end, I feel like this particular fragrance, Eau Capitale, doesn't have the density and strength of Portrait of a Lady, and because of that, I'm more of a fan of Portrait of a Lady in comparison to Eau Capitale because I love the beast mode qualities of this one. It's intense, it's in your face, loads of spices, loads of incense, lots of patchouli, lots of rose, and you know, a good amount of fruity touches to kind of like balance out all those intense qualities. So those are the differences between these two. It depends on what you like. I would actually, if I were you and you're saying or reading people say, oh, it smells like the Dada, or it smells like that, get samples of both. The best way for you to do it is either go to a store that has both of them and test them, or get samples and test them side by side, because when you're testing them separately, they're going to smell alike. In fact, I think sometimes things smell alike when I'm not testing them side by side. But once you're testing them side by side, you're going to see so much differences that you're going to say, why are these people claiming that their fragrances are similar when they're really not? So those are my thoughts on this one. One thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video, I recently sampled the latest Diptyque fragrance. It's another rose, but not an eau de parfum in black bottle rose. It's a limited edition eau de toilette rose called Automnale Rosa. great peppery, spicy rose. Totally different than this. They're nothing alike. And it's a limited edition fragrance. As soon as I have my bottle, I will do a review on that one. Just wanted to let you know that that is coming soon, because I really love this house, as I said. And I'll say it once again, go catch my top 20 Diptyque fragrances video so that you can find out more about my favorite Diptyque fragrances, which happens to be, I'll let you watch to find out what my #1 favorite is. So as mentioned at the beginning of the video, I am doing a comparison of 3 additional fragrances that do remind me of Portrait of a Lady, because, you know, this is probably one of the masterpieces, and I don't want to use that word frequently with fragrances, but I could say this fragrance is a masterpiece. I just think it's an amazing fragrance. If you haven't gotten your nose on Portrait of a Lady, you definitely should. But because it's a masterpiece, people do copy it a lot. So the first one I want to bring out and tell you about is a fragrance from the house of Penhaligons called Belgravia Chypre. So this one is interesting. I really love this one, and I feel like sadly it's discontinued. I don't know if 100% it is, but I feel like it is, because I don't see it on Penhaligon's website anymore, and it just came out like 2 years ago. I'm not sure why that happened, but maybe it was not a success. I don't know. But Belgravia Chypre is a great portrait of a lady-like fragrance with the greenish qualities of tempo. Because what's going on in here is there's mate note and there's mate in here. So the tempo has very greenish tea mate like qualities, and with Belgravia Chypre, it's not only smelling like a Portrait of a Lady's patchouli and rose, but with this one it goes into that kind of greenish territory with that mate note. But in the end, it's considered a Chypre, so I guess all these fragrances are sort of in that same family, even though I feel like Portrait of a Lady is more in the oriental direction. When you strip away some of the notes, it probably becomes a Chypre, but because it has certain notes, it's more of an oriental. But because this one has the patchouli, oakmoss, and rose, it reminds me of both Portrait of a Lady and a little bit of tempo because of the green. That's not tempo. This is tempo right here. Anyway, if you can get your nose on this one and you can get a bottle, I highly recommend it, especially if you like Portrait of a Lady. They're not identical, but they definitely smell alike. So that's Belgravia Chypre, a great scent. In fact, out of the 3 that I'm going to talk about now, it's my favorite of the 3. But the next one I'm going to talk about is this one from the house of Tiziana Terenzi. It's Porpora. Now this one, actually, a lot of people say it smells like you know, Portrait of a Lady, and I can see that. It has similarities. But in the end, this is a little different. It's still that spicy patchouli rose that we've come to love with Portrait of a Lady, but it does go in a different direction. For me, this one goes drier. It's a little more fresher rather than warm spicy for some reason. I think it has qualities of the fresh spiciness more than warm spiciness, because as I'm wearing it, the fragrance develops into this coolness, and it loses its warmth and then comes back to being warm again. So it has these kind of like different sides of the fragrance that sometimes I like it more and sometimes I don't, if that makes sense. Because I love this one so much, this one doesn't come close to this one when I'm testing them side by side. Now when they're wearing them separately, it's fine, and I get what I'm telling you. I experience what I'm telling you. It's the fact that, you know, it has the warm qualities, but it also has the fresh spicy qualities as well. So because of that, it's not my favorite of the 3 that I'm talking about. It is my second favorite though. So Porpora is from the house of Tiziana Terenzi. I'm sure there's deals out there. Go check it out. It's not discontinued. And again, I'm not 100% this is discontinued, but I haven't seen it on Penhaligon's website, so perhaps it is, but it only came out 2 years ago. I'm bummed that it is, but anyway, I have that much left in my bottle. But I love that one. I love it because of just the intensity. There's a punch with that one. This one definitely has the punch also, and as I said, it's goes through the warmth and then the cool and then fresh and then back to warm again, even though you're experiencing similar qualities. Now the notes are completely different with this one and Portrait of a Lady, but again, you have similar notes. You got the patchouli, you got the rose, you've got the incense, you've got the raspberry in here as well. So it smells definitely like Portrait of a Lady, but it has minor nuances. Anyway, that's Porpora. I do have a full review of this one if you haven't watched it. It is with Dahlia. Now the last fragrance I want to talk to you about is from the house of Hermetica, and it's Patchouli Light. Now the only thing that's different about these this particular fragrance and this house is the fact that these fragrances you can actually rub. It's oils, so it's not going to you know, it's not going to like lose because it doesn't have top notes. It doesn't have heart notes and base notes. It's just all one experience. So you don't experience top, heart, and base, and that's why you're able to rub yourself with this fragrance, because it's actually kind of softening and all that good stuff. So it's a different experience with this fragrance. But all of these fragrances are definitely with the oil. And you know, let me spray it on one more time, and you can see. It's really soft and smooth. It goes on very soft, and you know, it doesn't really disappear because you're working with the notes that are like all level. You're not experiencing the top, heart, and base, so you don't have to worry about you know fading away the top notes because you're rubbing your hands. But it is a very soft proprietary creation that they've created with this particular brand that allows you to do that. It's a soft, I mean, a lot of people have dry hands. I have dry hands, and I wish I wore fragrances like this more, because I can kind of like, you know, make my hands not so, you know, dry, but I just don't like oily hands for some reason. But I do it once in a while if I'm freshly showered and things like that. But what's going on with this one is it is similar to the Portrait of a Lady, but then again, it's not. So for me, this one hints at Portrait of a Lady the least. So if you like Portrait of a Lady but you hated it for some specific reason, I highly recommend you check it out, because you might like this more than Portrait of a Lady. It does seem a little harsher as far as notes. It feels like there's darker notes in this one in comparison to Portrait of a Lady. The fruitiness is not there, because the notes in here are patchouli, rose, violet, iris, and lemons. So it doesn't have the raspberries and black currants. But the cool thing about it is, if you're into the idea of moisturizing, this is definitely a brand you should check out. And again, there is a fragrance that sort of smells a little bit like Portrait of a Lady from Frederic Malle. So this is called Patchoulilight. It's Hermetica. I have a video on this and 2 additional fragrances on the channel if you're curious to learn more about it. And as I said, if you like the idea of moisturizing, this is a brand that you should totally check out. Anyway, that's Patchoulilight from the house of Hermetica. And those are the fragrances I'm going to talk to you about today. And again, in comparison to Portrait of a Lady and Eau Capitale, my favorite is Portrait of a Lady, but I don't hate Eau Capitale, guys. I really love it. It's just, if I'm going to compare the two, one has to win out. This is my favorite of the two, but I like them for different reasons. And let me know if you have tested all these fragrances, and if you've compared Portrait of a Lady to Eau Capitale, and do you share similar thoughts on these 2 fragrances, or do you still think they're very similar fragrances? I mean, if you're gonna nitpick it, you're gonna find a lot of differences, but if you're gonna smell it from a distance, they're gonna smell alike. And that's what I'm doing for you today. In the end, they don't smell alike to me, and they do because it's rose and patchouli and both, but they don't because there's so many different directions they go in if you are testing them side by side. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please list below. Otherwise, please like this video, please share it, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye.